communities, it's very critical you understand their beliefs, their methodology, their thought process. So I'm gonna share this with you just so that you can have an idea of how we're thinking about this conversation today. So we see right now oil, gas, coal, all the extractive industries. You have sun, water, wind, all the renewables. These two worlds are fighting, are colliding. These two industries are colliding. The irony is that they're all of the same creation. Including every one of us in this room are of that same creation. But are we the element that is creating the divisiveness? But could we also be the solution that creates a positive coexistence? Again, we're all of the same creation. So I want to plant that seed with you to think about as we go through the conversation today. And so energy is a very special gift. And with that, I'm going to look to the governor and former councilman to kind of pick up on that stage setting, if you will, from a tribal perspective. What is your general observation of where tribes are now with the energy sector, with energy development and energy economics? So,
Governor.
Okay. Well, Kosi Rawase Hopa. Well, like Dr. Lawarki said, I just finishing up a 3-day session with renewable energy within our community. So we have a pretty good turnout. A lot of elderly have come out to voice their concerns and their thoughts on where we should go as a tribe and how we should, I guess, lead into the future for our kids to come. And so, you know, going on that, we have always used the different, I guess, Mother Nature's gift to us, the sun, you know, the water, to do things from, you know, the way we designed our home into capturing the most radiant energy coming from the sun. You know, windows were placed in certain directions, doors were placed in certain directions. And so we use that. We have always used renewable energy in that sort. So it's kind of for us to take a leap and continue to use that towards the future, you know. And so with that, a lot of our community members have, you know, expressed a concern to, you know, control the emissions that we are using out into the world and take care of the world as a whole. It just goes back to our prayers. We never pray for just our own community. We pray for everybody within the whole world. And so with that thought, it brings us to the point to where, you know, our aspect is how can we help, even though we're such a small tribe, how can we get into providing or getting into the business of renewable energy, maybe not for just for our tribe, but also for the future and for future generations. How can we make it useful for us, you know, in a sense of saving what we have for future generations, like our ancestors. Their thought process was never for tomorrow, it was always for the future and how they could lead us into the future, and knowing that we're going to continue to prosper, we're going to continue to lead forward. So, you know, going back to that, so that's our vision within our tribe, and, you know, getting the buy-in from our community is there. We just have to set the stage and the foundation of how we're going to lead into the future of renewable energy. In that sense, it could be, you know, from the sun, from the water, but taking that aspect from it, from our community, and getting like their thoughts and knowing that it's what they want too, not just from us saying you're going to do this, but them coming together. How can we make it better for our people? So,
okay. Thank you, Governor. Kevin?
Thank you, Governor. I appreciate your words. They're very important. Before I begin, I would like to recognize a very important person a former DOE employee that was very integral in helping stand up the Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs. So Stage Right We have Mr. Derek Watchman, a member of the Navajo Nation. He worked at DOE, so everyone please give him a round of applause. I wouldn't be able to do my job if he didn't help set that foundation for the office. And those are things that we're, Indian way, we always recognize those people that helped us along the way. So what I've seen through various roles, one as a tribal member, one as a tribal councilman, and also in that most important role as the director for DOE's Office of Indian Energy. Tribes are running the gamut now when it comes to energy development. From my own tribal perspective, at the very beginning, my tribe is now financially affluent because of natural resource development, because of being in the energy sector. And what I've seen in my lifetime is I've seen my tribe transition from being a poor tribe to now being a financially affluent tribe that has the ability to take care of its own members from cradle to grave, the ability to affect policy at the highest levels, and the ability to help other tribes begin their energy development journey. So from that perspective, I've seen those positive benefits. I've seen what they can do to individual tribal members. But I also want to point out, too, that when it comes to energy development, that's a tribe's choice of how they want to utilize their assets that best benefit their community. And why is that important? Yesterday, we heard on the panel, there was a discussion about policy and about the unintended consequences that happen that damage these communities. We all have an understanding of that, but the part of the discussion that's left out for Indian country is there are some intended policies. Policies there that have handcuffed us. Policies there that haven't made us a player in the market or to gain market share. So against this backdrop of regulations, financially, extraction-wise, it's made it difficult to get capital inside Indian country. But tribes are starting to turn that corner. We've heard yesterday that there's a growing need to build 100 megawatt solar arrays. So when you see that and you see tribes entering into this, the one critical question that comes into place is, who is this development really for? If you have companies that want to come onto tribal lands and develop, is the tribe really the first person that's going to reap those direct benefits? And if so, how is that going to be accomplished? So it's a very precarious position for some tribes that don't have options, that may be financially strapped. So when we hear all these words, because they haven't been put into action yet, I myself begin to think about that question. Are these companies dangling a carrot in front of these cash-strapped nations, forcing them into these decisions, rather than them having an equitable part in that development? So seeing that happen around the world, or not around the world, but at least around Indian country, and my role as the director of Office of Indian Energy, up in Alaska, I've seen energy development create positive change. Up in the village of Buckland, about 2 years ago, for the first time ever, they went diesels off in the summer, which is a big deal in Alaska. And how'd they do that? By culturally relevant energy development. And what I mean by that is they use wind, solar, and battery backup in order to have their energy costs reduce. But under that backdrop, you see a lot of tribes doing things on a small level, and now we're seeing more tribes become more adept on a much grander scale. So what does that mean? That means out of every discussion when we talk partnerships with Native America, when the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce is talking policy, they need to also include that Native American perspective. When Native Americans talk about policy, they also need to include that Hispanic perspective. So by forming those partnerships, that's how we begin moving that ball forward for everybody, because now everybody's issues are being addressed. So when you see that happening and you see the beauty of that relationship, the one thing that we fundamentally ask ourselves is, these partnerships are necessary now for our communities. For far too long, our communities have been left out. But I think by joining our forces together, particularly through the energy development, we'll beginning that energy security journey, and through that, we'll be able to take care of our own communities, but most importantly, we keep that money in our communities, and we build our communities, and we build them the correct way. And understanding that, that's what I see the role of energy development playing for tribal nations.
Great, thank you, Kevin. That was really good. I mean, I really appreciate that insight, and you hit some really key points. And so to the next question, what role can Native American companies and tribes take in the building of an energy economy? James, you want to take a stab at that?
No, I think, thank you. And it's a great honor to be here today. And I think before I begin, I just want to thank the leadership of the Chamber for holding this and the bringing and helping bring the Native communities together with the Hispanic communities. As we all know, Hispanic America, so to speak, it's the fastest growing entrepreneurial class. And a lot of times, a lot of these populations live nearby Native American lands. So there's a great opportunity for that connectivity. In terms of your question, there's so much going on in the energy economy at the moment. There's a great deal of opportunities. I think we all know that recently the narrative has been very much in our faces, so to speak, because of the gas prices, because of renewable energy pushes the environment. But right now for Native American communities, as I crossed my last position across the lower 48 and in Alaska with Kevin, you know, what we've noticed is a great need to bring the opportunities to these Native American communities and to make a greater awareness within these communities of what potential there is. And there's great potential within Native American communities. Do you know that 20% of our natural gas, oil and gas, comes from Native American communities? And right now, close to 8% of renewable energy is derived from Native American communities. And this is just the beginning. We can grow this with the partnership, with fostering the Hispanic community, the Native American community, and all this experience and potential for wealth build by merging conferences like this, by merging our conversations to go forward and to expand the opportunities, and it's through awareness. So more specifically to your question, there's so many great programs out there within the Department of Energy, within Kevin's old office, within the other offices within the department, on how we can better utilize the resources, the vast resources that the Native American communities have. And it's just about, again, it's about awareness and education, and that's the biggest thing holding it back. It's not the ability or the resources, and that's where we have to bring more to light. It's a national security issue too. We need to do a better job in including all segments of our population, and the Native American community is a great part of our country, a great part of our history, obviously, and the growing Hispanic community is there to foster it together, and I look forward to the future.
Thank you, James. I appreciate that. Governor Sanchez, will you take a stab at that question? Again, what role can Native American companies and tribes take in the building of an energy economy?
Well, just reflecting on the past 2 days of our energy session, I think the biggest part is educating ourselves and able to lead ourselves forward. I mean, sometimes we think that we know the whole situation, but we don't. So I think a lot of it, the partnership is knowing that you work with great partners in order to establish great communication. And establishing that great communication leads us to better understanding of where we want to be and how we want to do this. I mean, there's a lot of, renewable energy companies out there, but sometimes they just want to, in a sense, but just want to use us for who we are and not really join a real solid partnership into moving us forward. So I think it's us to do our due diligence and establish those great relationships so that way we move as a whole, as instead of one by one, piece by piece, moving as a whole together in order to establish that, where we want to be in the future in our renewable energy.
Okay. Thank you, Governor. Great response there. And you said something there that I think is really key in this whole process as we're evolving forward as partners. And the word you used was education. So we can have all the great policy, all the great companies, but if we don't have capacity, that creates a challenge. And so that being said, Kevin, what kind of capacity or talent is needed in tribal communities to grow an energy business or energy sector?
That's a very tenuous development timeline. And the reason why it's tenuous is that there are many different factors affecting the reservation at any given time. So when you kind of go against a backdrop of some of the unknown, it's not a negative issue. It's a chance for opportunity. And that's the most important thing within Native communities. We don't look at these issues as deficits. We look at them as an opportunity to create change. So when we look at that capacity, I always tell people this: invest in your own people. That's the best way to get things done. You can send your kids off to school. Tribes can send their members off to school, But what happens when the members get these degrees and they want to come home? Are those jobs available? So as you're looking to develop an energy economy, one of the things that often also goes overlooked in that conversation is wealth management. So when tribes begin that journey and they get that direct revenue, what are they doing with that money? There's several different ways to help out your people. You can give them some of that money directly. You can stand up new programs and services that best benefits your tribe. But then again, what happens again to those people that want to come home? And this is why in that wealth management gap, once you start doing that, you can actually start planning for those positions back home with your people. So that when they get that education, that experience, they'll come back. Because the most important critical part is, at one stage in every native's life, even if they live off the reservation, we want to come home. Home is where everything is. So understanding that, that's how we build that capacity internally. All those issues that we're facing will revolve around several critical needs, but a lot of them revolve around the nexus of energy. So by building that internal capacity, and that can come in many different shapes and forms, and that's partnering with other organizations as well within the energy sector and non-energy sector. So when you do those things, you give your young ones that experience, because this is very, very critical here. As we move into the future, if we don't train our young and we don't get them up to speed, then again, Indian country will be left in the dust. And I'll just say this one statement here. The most important critical thing now that we're facing on the reservation is a lot of us up here, the governor, the former governor, we were born with technology. But now all these young tribal members are born into technology. It's part of who they are. And in my world, we call them digital youths. So they have to balance all these different worlds. And when you look at that economy, this next part I'm going to tell you is very, very critical. Tribes operate on all economic theories. We're capitalists by nature. We're socialists because we take care of our people regardless of their status. But we're also communistic because we share the resources and we all benefit from those resources. So juggling all those theories, tribes have been able to make it work, and they've been able to be successful at it. And that's a prime example of how Indian country is leading the way, using several different economic theories in order to take care of their own people. And that's very important for us in the tribal community.
Great, thank you, Kevin. And we should all be doing that, right? All taking care of each other. And you know, with that said, go into the next question here. And before I hop over there, in that element that Kevin is talking about in the capacity building, it's also very, very critical, and it's not unique to just tribal communities, but I think the general society, we've overlooked vocational skills. We've overlooked the plumbers and the welders and that skill set. That is going to be very, very critical that we put emphasis back on that in capacity building. So, so lastly, many renewable assets are manufactured and assembled in Asia. What opportunities and incentives are available to Native America to engage in the energy sector as manufacturers, supply chain, any of the business areas? So I'm going to just go down the line here and just kind of keeping our eye on our time here, so if you can give me a tight response on that question.
Sure, I'll start here. There's state and there's federal, obviously. On the state levels, there are many incentives through state government. And a federal level, within the Department of Energy, Kevin's office, Indian Energy, my old office, which was called Economic Development and Diversity. You know, those two offices, among all the other 24 other programming offices within the DOE, offer benefits and reliable sources of potential funds to Native American communities. It's about sourcing them and about understanding where they are. But there are the funds available. Native American lands are rich in natural resources, rich in land capacity. Over 5% of the U.S. land is comprised of native lands. And we have a lot of opportunities before us to partner with Native American communities to use their talent, to work with them with their resources, and to help our nation and national security going forward. So there are programs out there, both in the federal and the state level. It's a matter of navigating.
Okay. Great, thank you. James, Kevin?
There's a lot of interest from the private sector, especially with the most recent infrastructure bills that have been passed. So there's a lot of emphasis on a lot of private sector companies wanting to come into Indian country. And the most important part of that is, what does the tribe wish to do with that type of development? They can set up manufacturing bases, absolutely. But the biggest incentives for these tribal communities to get involved is, what's their equity in all of this? And a lot of tribes now, they don't want to be just a partner. They don't want to just get some royalties. They want ownership. So that's also very important when you enter into these partnerships, is understanding that a lot of tribes want to own this, and they want 100% coming back to their people. But also, equally important with that, when we look at those manufacturing bases, there's a big deal just happened recently with the Department of Energy and their loans program office. There's a tribal guarantee loan program. Has $2 billion worth of authorizations. Tribes can access that as well as their partners when they work together through a joint venture. And the most critical key that has changed now from the past, from when that program was first stood up, is that now the tribes can get direct funding from the government, and that's the game changer there. Now, on the private sector side, what you need to understand is that that type of manufacturing, or whatever you want to stand up, can be on the reservation or off the reservation through that program. But not only that, here's another critical part of it. The tribe has to own 51% of that company. And that's what makes it a very, very good incentive for the tribes to become involved, looking at establishing manufacturing bases and growing their own economy internally.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Governor?
Well, on that, I mean, yeah, going back to the part, yeah, it's ownership of what we want to be that sole owner of this development. But I think that going back to that, the key factor, there's available of grants, funds that we can use, but I think we have to have that buy-in from our tribal members too, because some of our elders still, you know, when you have manufacturing, sometimes you use a lot of water. So water is key to our survival as natives. We use water in a lot of our ceremonies. So, you know, when we do a manufacturing plant, if they use a lot of water, the view of them is, why are we wasting that water? Even though they know it's for economic development, it's for securing our future. So it's kind of educating the elderly to understand that this is what we need in order to secure the future of your grandkids and their grandkids. So I think the education of that, with that, also goes in, you know, providing that, to get in those opportunities to get the funding to have that collaboration, to have that joint venture into establishing these manufacturing plants or getting these things on the reservation. We have, like you said, a great land base, but it's also, you know, making sure that we as a community understand what we're using our land for. You know, we all want to hold on to land, not do nothing on it, but we also got to look for the future and look for our kids' future. So it's a lot of it just goes back to the education of our community, and that's where once we educate them on where we want to be and how we want to lead them, I think that's where we get that support from them to get to the next level.
Wonderful. Thank you, Governor. Thank you, panelists, for the discussion that you've put before us here. And you know, as we come to the end of our time here shortly, I also want to extend an appreciation to the USHCC, you know, for really opening up this microphone for Native America to have this voice on the stage. You know, we've all come through COVID, or maybe we're still in COVID, but when that started a couple years ago, right, we all went to Zoom meetings, WebEx, and so on and so forth. And the most popular phrase that has come out of that is, you're on mute. You're on mute, right? By putting this panel together, you're allowing us